And this is something that I now try to always remember, that if you're in the C-level for too long, you forget that people are nice to you because you have the big job. And you need to seek out disagreement. So you need to look for people who will actively tell it to you how it is, who are not afraid to disagree with you, people who are just genuinely honest with you and still want you to succeed.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders of the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best team and company cultures in order to create the best games. Every episode brings actionable insight to improve your leadership, self-awareness, and emotional management skills. Because becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. So, are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. Don't just see the future, know the future with today's sponsor, Source10. I've talked before about how Source10 is a necessary tool to compete in gaming these days. In short, Source10 empowers studios to build human-centric experiences by unlocking deep, psychological understanding of your most valuable audiences. At a time when we needed to know what our players would respond to, my team and I use Source10 and the product Navigator to identify key psychological insights across our audience for Plantopia. This prompted us to reshape our F2A, for example, promoting a stronger sense of productivity earlier on in the game. And this aligned with our audience's desire for empowerment and accomplishment, resulting in higher F2A completion rates and longer sessions. Source10 Player Intelligence Platform enables studios to unlock the full potential of their games and minimize risk across every stage of the development cycle. Visit go.source10.io that you can find in the show notes for a demo. Mention Rise and Play and receive a free feature, theme, and art style study included with your Navigator purchase, a $20,000 value. Learn why EA, Supercell, Wooga, and more use Source10 to create the best human-centric gaming experiences possible. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Rise and Play. Today I am with Ioana, but over time I won't have the need to introduce because Ioana has been also collaborating a lot with me on Rise and Play, writing content on the newsletter, and today participating to the podcast to discuss more about her own journey in gaming. Before we start, let me introduce you to Ioana. So Ioana is Chief Product Officer at Homa Games, a mobile game publisher, but also data and growth lab with a platform approach to finding and scaling hit games. Previously, she was the CEO of Game Analytics, where she started as head of product before taking on the role. Before going into gaming, Ioana has worked also in infrastructure and cloud and setting up the first big data platform for companies such as Booking.com. And also additionally, FYI, Ioana comes from Romania and now lives in London. So, hey Ioana, welcome.
Hey Sophie, thank you. It's lovely to be here with you and generally to collab with you on Rise and Play.
Yeah, it's been an exciting journey. And when I started the podcast, actually the platform, I think 2 years ago, I started alone and I was thinking, wow, it's quite a long journey alone. And so I really appreciate to have active collaborators. I would even say partner here to help advance the topic of leadership. So grateful that you're here as well today to share your journey. And let me begin starting to talk about the things that excite us. So what is it that is exciting for you these days?
I'm going to answer from two perspectives. On a professional perspective, I am working on Homa Lab, so the growth platform that Homa runs on, which is like what we use to test all of our prototypes, run all of our campaigns, accelerate our organization and growth, do all of our analytics, and very soon our live ops. It's a purely private platform. I mean, we do have kind of an open layer for studios, but a lot of the complex tools that we have are internal. So it's kind of a shame that people don't get to see it, but I'm so excited about it. Personally, I'm just trying to calm down, if that makes sense. So I am trying to live a bit more mindfully because I think as a doer, I'm kind of always in this mindset of what am I doing next? What's happening this weekend? Why am I not being productive 100% of the time? So I'm just trying to, for one, maintain my knowledge and expertise in areas that I'm personally interested in. For instance, writing for Rise and Play gives me that, an ability to research interesting topics, but at the same time to just take time to live mindfully and not just be in kind of doing mode 100% of the time.
Yeah, this is a challenge because even my personal also activities is on Rise Play. So like sort of working, but doesn't feel like work. So I do relate a lot to what can I do? What can I produce and create? But let's begin with your journey in games, because also I'm quite curious how it seems like you climbed up the ladder, if we can say, in really important executive roles with responsibility, and your time at Game Analytics when you started as head of product. So I'm curious to hear more how you started there and what was your mission and how did that become for you then the responsibility of CEO, that whole journey. Could you tell us more about it?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So I think in general, something that has been a driving force in my career is what I call doing your boss's job. So really learning to manage up and understanding what's needed from you, but also really trying to absorb what kind of the roles around you need while staying focused on your own area as well. For instance, I was a director when I was 26. And one of the reasons I could do that was because even when I was in product marketing roles, I really cared about the technical side. So I spent a lot of time with engineers, really wanted to understand things in detail. So at some point, I became this kind of link between departments and person that kind of understood everything that was going on. And that is a great catalyst for promotion because you understand everybody's point of view and you're able to get them to work together. So I think in a sense, it was almost the same in game analytics where I joined as head of product. The team was very new because we were restructuring, rebuilding the team after game analytics had been acquired by Vista. And I had a chance to work very closely with the engineers, but also the rest of the business and the shareholders. So the kind of product team in China, I was working with them directly. So there was the London office, the Copenhagen office where the company was founded, and management in China. And this ability to act like a catalyst between all of them and try to, let's say, protect the engineering team from requests that were coming from shareholders, but also give shareholders enough of what they wanted and also step in and support the CEO's message when that was needed, put me in a good position where everybody knew me and everybody worked pretty well with me, or at least better with me than we worked with each other. At the same time, something I want to highlight is there's definitely a big right place at the right time effect. So I was very skilled technically, people and so on, but the CEO decided that he was going to transition out. And if he didn't leave, I might have never become the CEO. So it's not just that I did well, it's also that the opportunity presented itself and I could take it, because there's plenty of people that do well in their career, but don't always have the same opportunity. So when a lot of my friends, for instance, go like, why have I not grown into this or that situation by the time I'm 30, 35, 40? It's a bit like, sometimes you can't always control the opportunities that you get, but you need to be ready when they present themselves. You need to have your homework done when the time comes.
Quite interesting. Yeah, I think it's a good reminder about the timing, but be ready. So that's the only thing you can control. Let's take a few steps back here on how you establish yourself at Game Analytics as a head of product, because what you describe, where you have helped, supported the team, been the bridge with engineering and also stakeholders, those are skills. Those are communication skills, managing up, being able to adapt your language, communicate the context, have people working with you, trusting you, etc. It's not a given and intuitive. So how did you approach that? Did you have the skills before you got the job? Did you learn intuitively on the way? Or did you educate yourself? How did you acquire those skills?
Something that I think was really important was building the initial trust with the engineers and having them trust that I can speak on their behalf. And this is not something that happened overnight. It took months to get there. So one of the ways I obviously did this was I genuinely was prepared and I learned about my products. I immediately looked into the technology. For instance, Game Analytics, the original version was built in Erlang, and we stuck with Erlang and then Elixir. And I hadn't worked on projects built in Erlang. So I had to read up a lot about this, a lot of the kind of connectors or services. So I had to do just a lot of research to be able to speak with engineers and just have that, when somebody speaks to you and they can tell that you're understanding them and that you are a good peer for them. So that was one thing. Two, I already knew a lot about data from before, from working with clients, but because the approach was slightly different, making sure I listen and I'm open to the approach from this company rather than just being like, oh, I've done this for 10 clients. We should do it my way because I've done it more than you have. And just really taking it, like understanding, approaching everything with curiosity. Why do you want to do it that way? What are the benefits? And have you thought about this risk and that risk, and taking more of a coaching like approach than I am the product person I'm deciding what to do. The other thing that will always save you as a product person is knowing your client. It's like you can basically your clients are the biggest thing when you don't know what to do, or there's some discussion between management and engineers and so on. The only tiebreaker is the client, right? So you want to know that you've spoken to your users, you know their perspective deeply, you've had the interviews, you've had the demos. And I think a lot of people just avoid doing that too soon, or when they don't feel prepared. But being able to just admit that you're new in the role and speak to clients, and again, do your homework when you show up for the call, but just accept that you're not going to know everything and be transparent with them. People are surprisingly understanding. So I would meet studios and I would just tell them, like, I'm building a new strategy for the product, and I know a lot of things about it, but I really understand how you use it and what your challenges are. And people will just be supportive of you. They will try to help you learn if they really believe that you care. So all of those things were necessary. So then any conversation I showed up with, I could understand the tech, I could understand the clients, I understood the expectations. So I always had some form of reasonable answer. Even if the answer wasn't always what people wanted to hear, I could argument it very well.
Yeah. As you have shared, actually, things that are not so related to skills, but it's an approach, right? So approaching as a client is very helpful. Like, as the audience, who are you talking to? Understanding the needs. And I also note that you took the time to educate yourself on a technical level to be able to have a conversation and be incredible, basically, in your own field when you start to have a conversation and try to understand the needs and help the teams.
By the way, just a quick note, because I think something that is worth mentioning when educating yourself. So I still get this occasionally. I will ask somebody to explain something or to answer, and they will give me like the business answer, which is a very high level. And when I try to tell them, no, please give me the technical answer, like talk about the technology you're using, what you're doing with them, it will take asking them 3 or 4 times to get the right thing. And I think that also being a woman has something to do with it here, where if people look at you and they don't imagine you understanding things super technically, so you have to keep pushing. And sometimes, like when you develop a technical language yourself, I realized a much faster way is to actually ask them a very specific technical question around like a queuing system. And I think I asked if we use RabbitMQ, and then immediately the tone changed, and the engineer that I was speaking to started to speak to me as if I understood everything, whereas before it was just very high level. So sometimes as a product person, depending on your background and overall what people's first impression of you is, sometimes you have to dig in order to get the information that you need. Also, just don't take it personally. Nobody's trying to be unhelpful. They just are starting from a place, and you need to find common ground. But that has happened to me a lot being in data and in tech, I would say.
Yeah, it's actually acknowledging as well that hard to prove here, but there's definitely a bias in the way we are perceived. And I can imagine if you're a woman, you are maybe not seen the most technical or knowledgeable about the field. And so being aware also of the bias, on the other side, and then working with it to break the bias. So that is one that I can say I have experienced as well. I know it's not fully our responsibility, but you can help the other one meet you here where you are, being aware of that. That's our role as lead. We will always have to make double effort to meet someone than they should do to us. As you are taking over the position as CEO, I'm curious of how the transition happened, because taking the role of a CEO in a company, it's quite a big shift. The departure of a CEO, especially in that case, that was the founder. How was it communicated? How were you groomed to take the position? How even the nature of your job changed? How was the experience for you?
So when I was head of product, I was already the contact point. So I think that set me up as a good potential successor. Also, by the way, the CEO and CTO were leaving at the same time. So this also created like a bigger void. So it wasn't just looking within the C-level for a successor. Secondly, there was a period of transition where I was COO. So basically running the entire company, but did not have the CEO title yet. So that was put in place for 6 months. So I could kind of officially get the big title and start changing the reporting lines and so on. I do think that when I started to do the CEO role, I thought I knew everything already, right? I knew the company, I knew everybody. I was already reporting to the same people and working with them, but it felt different than what I thought. For one, something interesting was that everybody all of a sudden started treating me better. Like I would go to engineers with my proposals and they would just say yes much more quickly. And this happened kind of overnight. So I had to change, if that makes sense. I think just when you show up with a title, people are automatically just nicer to you. if you have the bigger title versus a lesser title. It's only before they were being difficult and so on. But all of a sudden, conversations were a lot easier. And this is something that I now try to always remember, that if you're in the C-level for too long, you forget that people are nice to you because you have the big job. And you need to seek out disagreement. So you need to look for people who will actively tell it to you how it is, who are not afraid to disagree with you. And of course, these shouldn't be super negative people. I'm not saying that, but people who just genuinely honest with you and still want you to succeed. When I realized that, I had a couple of people like that, and I immediately strengthened my relationships with them to make sure that I was always understanding what was going on, the reality of the situation. 2, I remember the role feeling just physically heavy and having trouble sleeping for the first few months. So it did all of a sudden feel like I was responsible for people in a way that I wasn't before, because before I was kind of doing the job or the responsibilities as an extra next to my job. So before it was great. Now I kind of owed to everybody to do a good job. It made me really appreciate how heavy this responsibility feels. And also it made me realize, like, oh, now I have to do this for a few years. It's truly not something I can just, oh, I don't like it, so I'm just going to stop being the CEO in 6 months. You're committed for a time, and you're committed seriously. I was then very lucky that I could build like a lot of trust with my team. They knew me. So once they really saw that, let's say, my personality didn't change, and that I was still kind of the same person and still like a good co-worker being with them, even though I was now, like, we used to be on the same level and I was now their boss, everything got into a good groove and we worked together very well. And I remember often thinking that it would actually be easier to just be the boss. And what I mean by that is to not foster this kind of radical candor, let's say, because you get so many people disagreeing with you that sometimes it's, oh my God, it sounds like I can't do anything. But that's how you actually grow. And that's what makes people trust you. And you get better at it. Over time, you get better at managing these things and anticipating things. But in the beginning, the first year, I think it's really about just accepting that everybody's going to tell you're wrong about everything and finding a good way forward.
Let's take a moment to discuss about feedback and getting feedback, because as you took the position on a C-level, I think it's important to remind that our title precedes us and we represent a position of power, a position who can basically fire also people. So of course, it will be less easy for people to give directly a feedback, and especially negative to your face, and especially for a new CEO or a new C-level person. But still, you said that you get quite a lot of feedback during the first year. So what have you done or created to get feedback upward, or pass through fear or discomfort of people to give directly feedback to their CEO?
When I built these relationships, like, I strengthened my relationships with people that were the kind of people that would give not just me, but almost everybody this kind of very direct, honest feedback. I think everybody else also just saw this as a good sign. And they also saw that these people would raise points in meetings where they would disagree, like in public, and everything would be fine. Like, we could have a conversation and move on. So basically what you do before getting the feedback is much more important. When you are in a meeting and you do have a disagreement, communicating your point, but allowing the other person's point to be also extremely important, and not overriding them. When you are in a team's meeting and there is a team lead, not overriding the team lead just because you have the bigger title. Also, even if you fundamentally disagree with something, taking your time to discuss that with the person afterwards, if you are within their team, or if it is something where you do want to set it up in the moment, you have to be very mindful about it. And it's okay, I understand team believes like this, like 9 times out of 10, I will fully support you. This is just the case where, please, I would like to prioritize things this way for this and that reason. So kind of acknowledging that it's an exception for you to do that. And it's not something that you expect to just be able to rock up and make decisions for the team in their meetings. I think all of those things are very important. And if you do them, people will show up a lot calmer and at least try to give you some feedback, especially if you seek it out. If you ask them, okay, look, I am trying to determine how to be a better leader for you, how to run this company better. What do you think are the priorities? What would you do differently if you were me? And then combine this feedback into your own view and opinion. And of course, you don't need to say agree with everybody. You can disagree with people. And I think initially it was much more important for me to convince people of something or another. And after a while, I realized that was counterproductive and I was not convincing anybody. People that have a strong opinion already, almost sometimes by arguing with them, you make their previous opinion stronger. I didn't think that was the point. My role was to decide on something, not to convince everybody that what I'm deciding on is the right thing. So I became more comfortable with that as well. And I also continued to seek it out in one-to-ones, also in places where people could speak to me directly. And if I had a suspicion that a relationship wasn't going well, I did involve my HR director. And I asked him to also have conversations with people to ensure that they could give their point of view. And he got private or anonymous. And that's also accepting that is also very important for people to trust that what is anonymous truly is anonymous. So that also helped in situations that were maybe I couldn't get some piece of feedback directly. There's people that can help you do that.
Very actionable insights. One is about consistency, as I heard, like your behavior when you receive feedback, especially negative or hard feedback, is to accept it, right? So you have to watch your behavior as a leader. Like, are you really welcoming the feedback, or are you creating a negative experience after you did receive the feedback? So that was very good, concrete example, your behavior in meeting or in one-on-one or alternative options where despite your best efforts, some people will not feel comfortable, and giving them alternative to give it indirectly or anonymously is really important if you really want to hear everyone. And at last, your role is not to please everyone as a CEO. Your role is to get input from people on their role with a better view and insights they have on the decisions they have to make more on the department, for you to make a better decision with your own context. But like you said, spending energy to convince everybody, that's not what the role should be about, where you're setting a direction and a strategy to help the company for XYZ. And there will be people not convinced by it. And your job is to decide even with that.
Something I realized that I wanted to add is you will make a lot of mistakes. Like, it's easy for me to say this now, having made a lot of mistakes, but it's also extremely important to apologize.
Yes.
Just apologize to people when you make mistakes, and don't make it like a fake, I'm sorry you felt that way. Make it, I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry I got this wrong. I am still learning as well. I don't always have the right answers. Trust me that I am doing my best, and I don't always see the best way forward. And regardless if you agree with my decisions or not, or even if I make mistakes, I still have like the best of the company at heart and the best of the team at heart. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. It's extremely important to admit your mistakes and apologize like a human being. And if you do that, people will start seeing you like a human being. And that increases people's trust, but also their vulnerability around you. They will admit their own mistakes. It will be easier for you to manage them if you admit your mistakes. And I think this is actually one of the hardest things to do, because you don't want to seem vulnerable as a leader. You want to seem like you have everything together. You always know the path forward.
Very good reminder. Yeah, mistakes will happen, and it's very uncomfortable because it has bigger consequences when you make mistakes, and they are more visible. The only way forward, I would say, for sustainability is to own it. Before we reach the last part more, where I wanted to ask you more about your current role today as the CPO at OMA. How was the transition? How did that happen? And how is it different from your role as a CEO at Game Analytics?
It was an interesting transition in that when I decided that I was going to stop being the CEO, I didn't exactly know what would come next. And being a CEO is very much, it becomes your identity, because you are so personally connected and invested that when you decide to stop being that, you almost don't know what you are. A lot of the CEO role is dealing with the kind of finance aspect of that. So a lot of the time you're working on budgets, what you've spent, what you're going to spend, approving things, org charts, and so on. So you become kind of very disconnected from the original craft that you had. So I knew that I wanted to go back to doing something a bit more practical, at least for a while, and to reconnect with the part of my role that I loved, which was to build things. And secondly, I think I managed the company for a very difficult time. So it's not just that it was COVID, but our parent group, Vista, who owns the ad network Integral, at the time had a very public crisis that was in the press and so on. And that affected the entire group, including Game Analytics. So that made life for the next 12 months extremely difficult. We were in the middle of a pandemic with a very public crisis on our hands, trying to manage a team that was doing more and more with the same people, with the same money, and so on. So I felt like I took the ship through the storm, and we came out to the other side. Everything was growing again. Everything seemed like it was going in the right direction. So I thought, okay, now I'm going to stop. But I was also fully burnt out by that entire experience. And I wanted to do something that would more energize me and again, bring me closer to my craft. And the experience of talking to them. So I first spoke to Daniel. I mentioned him when I was still at Game Analytics that, hey, I think I'm going to go soon. And he was immediately so interested in getting me on board. And the company just treated me so well. And when I met them, they were all so ambitious and positive and energetic that it kind of gave me all the life that I needed. And it was such a welcome change that I wanted to join. I wanted to deliver value for this team, to help them on their journey. And it just naturally fell into place where the role was what I wanted, be closer to product again, and the team was amazing. So,
wow, I have not been of CEO position long time for any company, but I do have a lot of empathy with one thing you said about that it becomes your identity, and it felt very personal for the good and bad part of it, unfortunately. But yeah, there's definitely something into a transition from being a CEO of a company to taking a more operational role. And that sounds like it was also a pretty rough journey, but also a journey of growth, as you said. And let's finish our conversation today on the last part, which is more like covering all the learnings you've had on different positions, because we discussed about it. And you swapped as well different roles where you were on an operational role, head of product, then CEO, which is also more a leader role, although there's a lot of management involved. And now like a CPO at Homa. What are your thoughts and challenges about this mindset and change between manager and leader? What was the learning for you?
I think that one of the things that you learn as a leader when like your remit is so big that you just physically cannot control everything. As a manager, a lot of the skills that really help you be a great manager aren't necessarily the skills of a great leader. So for instance, as a manager, you're often asked who is doing what, who's working on what state is this in? So you have to have very granular knowledge and exert a lot of control over what people are doing, how efficiently they're doing it, and so on. When you are a leader, you much more need to put the right people in the right positions, give them the right resources, the right training that they need, and coach them for the thinking that you want them to have in terms of making decisions. And you have to trust that if they are the right people, a great work ethic, focus on excellence, ambition, then they are going to go much further into their area than you could ever even imagine them going, because they will become experts, they will feel very empowered, and they will actually exceed your expectations. I think it's a really hard switch to make, though, because the two seem like they should be similar, but they're actually so different.
And I did record a great episode with Ben and Aaron about exactly this debate, the difference between being a people manager and a leader. And manager is how do you execute to make things happen. So it's really managing, like people, planning, etc., project toward an outcome. And leader is like how do you influence a group to achieve an outcome together. And so there are many components around that which are enabling, growing people to be autonomous, being able to make a decision. So yeah, it's a very different focus and mindset, and even require a different set of skills. Another topic we discussed in your journey as well in leadership, and the one that where I think we met greatly with Rise and Play, is the level of consciousness you have in your leadership.
Yeah, it's something I care a lot about, and I think we kind of reached the same conclusion independently, which is great to see. But something I experience is that truly placing trust in people, if you selected the right people, goes much further than anything else. You first have to admit that everybody's a person. Not everybody is excellent every day that they are working. Everybody has brain fog. Everybody's like hungover some mornings if they have a life and they've gone out and they celebrated something. Everybody has friends' birthdays and they need to go grab a present for somebody. People have kids and their kids get sick. So you have to, first of all, see there's humanity in people. Two, you need to align people around a common vision, not just of what you're building as a product, but also of what you want to be as an organization. Like, how are you going to treat each other? And to treat that as importantly as the product that you are building, because that will teach people how to react to one another. And it really starts from the top. It starts from you. So for instance, if somebody is late, offer them help. Don't blame them. One of the first things I did was teaching them to say, hey, I can see that your team is maybe not falling behind on this. Can I do anything to help you? Do you need any help from anybody else? Because obviously we also need to coordinate these efforts. So if we're on schedule and you need a bit of help. Let us help you or tell us what we can do. It sounds like something obvious. It took me months to get people to change this approach because people who have been in other companies that do tend to finger point and have been in other cultures that are not high in trust, they expect to be blamed. So they immediately get into defensive mode. So kind of getting them out of that mode is a process and it will take some time. And finally, I think also being able to know that people can be better than you at things and not taking that personally either. Accepting that as a leader, if you're going to have a lot of people under your remit, you're not going to be an expert in any of their areas. Like you're not going to know anything better than anybody. And you have to accept that and to use your knowledge to encourage people to be better than you. So you shouldn't treat it as, I know things better, I am the boss. And so you should treat it as, I really want you to surpass my knowledge areas. I want to be learning from you. I want to come to these meetings and be in awe of all of the amazing things you're doing. But I'm also going to keep my knowledge level high, so I'm not going to be easy to impress. You have to work hard, but also I'm going to do my best to be a good peer for you. And that sets up a really wonderful, constructive relationship where people want to impress you and they like that you're happy for them and they want to show you the latest things that you're doing. And then you don't really need to apply a lot of control at all. So it turns into a very rewarding, wonderful relationship. And unless you had this, you wouldn't know it's even possible.
Yes. And maybe as well in my own language, I think here indeed treating employees first as humans before resources, just through that lens, it helps to adapt all your behavior, right? So why is the person not behaving so well? What's happening in their life or at work? Why are people acting out? So always taking the best intent with people to explain or find a context of why a person is behaving this way and support them. So that's one key element of it. And the second part of it is really about developing the consciousness, because behind conscious leadership, there's really the thought that you are really self-aware and you are aware of your own bias or what's going on with you, so you can support others and you can enable others to also have this level of self-awareness and be able to communicate when something's not right. So it's going on another level of depth when we think about leadership, which is going beyond managing, again, resources, project, and really humanity with its own complexity and system where we are today with social context, COVID, environmental, and so on, and understanding, incorporating more people at work as their whole self and not just a part of them that we analyze and judge only.
Sure. I wanted to just add to that of course you still need like some sort of measurement framework. So you are still going to have processes, you're going to have one-to-ones, you're going to give people feedback, you're going to hold people accountable. So just because you understand that everybody's human doesn't mean that you're completely soft and everybody can do whatever they want.
Yes.
You have a set of rules, people know the rules in advance and they need to follow the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, there are consequences, but the consequences are proportional to the rule. And that means that if you delayed something that affected the entire company and your team, even if you had something super important that was personal going on, you need to have let everybody know, have made a plan, adapt to that. You can't just rock up and be like, I was sad yesterday, therefore I didn't fulfill any of my commitments. That's not what conscious leadership means. Conscious leadership means you, in the morning when you feel that way, you message everybody to say, hey, I think I'm going to need today off. Here are some ways that I'm going to manage taking this time off. I've moved some of this work in the future. This person has agreed to do some of this work for me. All of my commitments are going to be filled, or I'm going to request an extension and mention why. So it's important to have that framework around you and then kind of be a human inside of it.
Yeah. Important as well. Of course, it's not just for the sake of we will support you and do whatever you want, but it's a lens of support, of seeing people as humans. And of course, we are still in the company as employees and with an expected outcome. And those should not negate or discard the fact that we are here for an outcome as a group. But the way we treat each other could be different from what we have known in the past in how to run organizations.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you, Ioana, for the conversation today. This is the first we have in one-on-one, but for sure not the last in a podcast. As we know, we have recorded others. But thanks for joining the conversation today, especially to share your own journey. And I think it's quite impressive that you've been really on those high-level positions and learned so fast. And also being very humble about it, like still learning, making mistakes, and, we're human at the end of the day. We try our best with the role or hat we're wearing. And so that's very humbling as well to hear your experience and you spending the time to share as well those insights today.
Thank you so much. It was a really great conversation.
Take care.
You have to. Bye, Sophie.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am trying to grow a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. So if you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. Also, please don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss out on future content. Every episode is packed with actionable insights that will help you improve your leadership skills now. And if you are interested in learning more on the topics that we discussed today, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, and there you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership. So, have a great week, and until the next time,